I think in generally we've had good success
Hmm.
with broaching those topics. I think for us making these films now, we have the benefit of sort of the credibility that our NFL films kind of forefathers and foremothers have created
Yeah.
in terms of a lot of these relationships. So they know that we take their stories seriously. We know we they know. I think generally we treat them with fairness, with respect, with
Leadership isn't about a title that you have. It's more about the ability to earn someone's trust.
I wanted to start the first game. I wanted the ball.
Football is an emotional game. It's a passion level affair.
You dream about being one of the best. You dream about winning a Super Bowl. All of the moments in between define your career. I had to be able to do it my way.
There's a lot to discuss here. I mean, obviously who isn't an NFL fan, but I was really almost addicted to watch. I was binge watching these episodes. Like there's we've seen a lot of documentaries on these players even and certain, but there's some kind of secret sauce we're using here with what you're making here with icons. And just from a watcher's perspective, from a viewer's perspective, I love the blend of behind the scenes and on the field, but it really all comes together in a way, and you don't fear asking the tough questions or the controversies that these players may be facing in their personal lives or on the field. Tell me an approach that you used with icons really to kind of make it its own thing in the way it is.
I think thank you for the kind words and thanks for having me. It's great to talk icons. It's a series we're really excited about. We're in the third season. We're up to 20 episodes now when this season finishes. So we love telling these stories in this way for a couple of reasons. We think the power of the archives in NFL films has developed over the years really gives us this extremely unique and distinct starting point. We have assets that not just that nobody else has, but in many cases nobody's seen, even some of our own teams. When we have a great long form format like MGM Plus has provided us in this series, we're really able to go into material we've never gone into before. We're able to go, to encompass the familiar moments, the biggest championship seasons, the award-winning seasons, sort of the headline bullet point moments of these guys' careers, but also go further and look past, those just the edges of those milestones and get into what are maybe some of the stories that haven't been told before. And we think because of that, it gives us sort of a new perspective, obviously the perspective of time, particularly in any of the episodes. Most of the episodes, we are able to interview the icon again and ask, sometimes we're asking questions we've never asked before because we're always trying to dig new ground. But in many cases, it's as simple as we're going to ask you about a particular event that we've asked you about a lot. We want to know what your perspective is on that at this point in your life. It's almost that luxury to look back on something with the wisdom and the space of time to because in many cases their perspective has changed. In other cases they tell the same story about feeling those same emotions. So I think it's the space that we have and the starting point of that material. And obviously I think it always comes back to the stories. That's the last thing I mentioned, because the stories that these guys have written with their lives and with their journeys are just really compelling. It's the reason all those years that we've been following some of these iconic figures. So then to go to stories that are basically so epic, but also to be able to examine them in a really intimate way enables us to, not just dig into a football story, but to uncover a human story. And, we hope in every episode, a story that resonates with people that are, to your point, folks that love football, but maybe beyond just avid football fans, they can take something from these films and from the stories of these icons.
Me being based in Chicago, a huge Bears fan, the Mike Singletary one was the first one I was watching. And I learned so much about Mike. I as a Bears fan, you kind of follow him and, his career and what he's done. But, especially that comment I remember here in Chicago sports radio and I mean, around the country played, when he did that presser, can't win with them. And ironically, I spoke to Vernon a couple months back too. But, I just found some of this stuff and never before really seen and heard from Mike. And I feel like in these documentaries, you guys aren't afraid to ask the tough questions or the controversial stuff too. How willing were these, players to talk about, some of their on the field and off the field, potential controversies or bad press and stuff? Because I found them to be very open and refreshing watching them kind of look back and maybe admit to some mistakes and admit faults. I thought that was a very humanizing sort of part of the documentary that really connects you to them as a person outside of the gladiators that they were on the fields. How receptive did you find these players over the years to be to kind of speaking on things that might be uncomfortable?
I think in generally we've had good success with broaching those topics. I think, for us making these films now, we have the benefit of sort of the credibility that our NFL films kind of forefathers and foremothers have created in terms of a lot of these relationships. So they know that we take their stories seriously. We know they know. I think generally we treat them with fairness, with respect, as people, not just as football players. And we try and be very respectful of the journeys that they were in at the moment and where they've gone since then, and try and put things in real context. So I think because of that, we've benefited from those relationships and been able to revisit some of those moments, whether it's a silly folly type thing that maybe some folks wouldn't want to laugh at themselves, but others are perfectly willing to, or something that is more controversial. I would say generally we've had a pretty good batting average, I guess you'd say, of kind of bringing those stories up. And again, I think when you're telling a larger story of a life and you sort of present that mission to these icons, I think they these guys get it. They know we're gonna want to try and explore these areas and tell a full story, beginning, middle, and end. And Mike's a great example. He was as candid, as self-reflective, as humorous. He could laugh at himself about the moment with Vernon, but he also put it in great reflective context about things he would have done the same or why he did them that way, things he may have done differently. He really leaned into that moment as just what it is, a part of his journey. Didn't shy away from it, and it makes the interviews really fun. We call them interviews, but they really just become conversations where you get really engrossed. The way a guy like Mike Singletary talks, it's no wonder why he was a motivational speaker. No wonder why he was a motivator in his own huddle so often on his own sideline, because his passion comes through, but not just with volume and intensity. Sometimes it's with quiet and with very deliberate thoughtfulness, and you can see he's very willing to share, and he finds this great range. He has this great articulate ability to share through different emotions and different presentations of all the moments in his life. So I did that interview. I didn't edit the show. There were 2 episode producers, but I did the interview with Mike, and it was one of the more fun ones I've ever done, because it was such a blend of how thoughtful and quiet he could be, but then he would just pop and give you this great intense payoff to a story, or just take it in a different direction. It really kept me engrossed during the course of the conversation.
Yeah, no question. I mean, a dynamic personality. Speaking of these personalities, like, what is the process to select? I mean, we've have a lot, a good list of Hall of Famers here and NFL greats from so many decades and generations. And I feel like every episode, there's a unique personality. Like Mike's is very different than Jim Brown's, but they're all such fascinating people. And you guys are able to convey that and capture that, and their realness and authenticity. And to Charles Woodson, who was more of a modern player, like, how do you guys go about the selection process? Because not only are you looking for NFL greats that resonate over the decades that we had, but also these captivating personalities that are different in a lot of different ways too, but also uniquely impactful in similar ways too. What is the selection kind of process? Because you guys have so far, whenever I watch, I'm like, wow, this is great. I mean, couldn't imagine picking anyone else for this, but what is sort of the selection process and criteria in a sense?
I think there's not one, I would say, nuts and bolts formula, and the things that there are sort of things we think about. There's really a small list. I mean, it really starts with who's got a really interesting, compelling story, right? In our case as filmmakers, we talked about the archives a little bit. Who are the icons that we've documented the most? not to say you couldn't do an Icons film about, players across all eras, but the more we've interviewed them, the more we've shot them off the field, the more we have game footage and mic'd up sound in them. That's always certainly a strength. You're always like, you're sort of putting marbles on the scale until it tips far enough that you say, we can make a film about that. So of course, certainly the strength of their archives is a factor. Again, we've done both posthumous subjects. We've done Walter Payton, we've done John Madden, we did Jim Brown this year. He's part of season 3. So that's not necessarily, we can do both, but it is wonderful when we can have an icon who's still with us, because we can get that new, fresh interview and it had new perspective to the story. They're not all, I'd have to look back to see if all 20 of them have been Hall of Famers. They very well maybe, but again, it's not to say we couldn't do someone who's not, for whatever reason, in the Hall of Fame, but did have an iconic career. I think it really, that word story is really where it begins and ends. Like, what is it about that individual that we think is worthy of such a long form, in-depth treatment, that we can really bring an interesting thing to the screen because of the way that this individual sort of made their journey through football and through life.
Do you kind of guys go through a selection process and contact the players or the representatives, or do you ever hear anyone kind of come like, hey, you should do one on me sort of thing, and voluntarily pitch themselves for that too? Because I imagine, with such quality that you guys produce, there would be interest from, I'd imagine, from players and coaches to maybe be part of this sort of legacy show.
I mean, I think one of the cool things about NFL films is we're always sort of making football movies. So those conversations are happening all the time about, with greats, with lesser known players. Again, whoever's got an interesting story, it's almost like a conversation that never ends. And then sometimes we figure out, based on the right timing, just as an example, Jim Brown passing away in the spring sort of brought him back to mind. Like, all right, I think this might be a guy that could be worthy for now's a good time to look back on his life. We felt the same about John Madden the year before. I think there's no one way other than who are the people that sort of resonate with us, and that we think, again, when a series like this comes up and we have a new opportunity to delve into a story, there might be someone we've done a film on, it hasn't been 20 years. That individual's still alive. They've done a lot in their life since then. Why don't we give them a new treatment through a series such as Icons? Because we can really update and elevate what they've done in the past, but give it new context and whatever's been done since the last time. So no one answer with that. I think, again, it's just this it's the mission of making football movies and telling stories sort of never ends. And we're just always kind of trying to find the right time and place to plug in some of these great stories. And that's what's been so great about Icons. It's been, Jim Brown, we've made quite a few Jim Brown movies over the years. I mean, going back to the 60s, obviously, but I think this one is, in its own way, is new and different and fresh. And again, provides a new, fresh context based on kind of where time and history has gone since the last time.
Have there been subject matters that you wanted to do but couldn't, or episodes that you maybe were on the process of making but you had to can them or not do it? Have you come across sort of scenarios like that where things just didn't work out and you had to cut it out or not happen, or sort of situations like that? Because it happens in filmmaking all the time. Just curious if it happened with this series.
No, for sure. That definitely happens. I can't say that's ever happened with Icons. I think certainly we haven't started one that we haven't finished. That scenario has definitely not happened. And I guess to the other question, I mean, it's sort of like the answer is all of them. All the ones we haven't made, I want to make. We just haven't made them yet, right? I mean, there's so many great, again, even if you only took the Pro Football Hall of Famers, just that pool. I mean, there's hundreds more players that we could explore. And I do believe there's ones beyond the Hall of Fame membership that are worthy of this kind of treatment. So I think, we love our relationship with MGM Plus. We're hopeful that down the road there'll be future episodes, and we continue to give this depth and reflection and revelatory treatment, stylized filmmaking treatment to people we have yet to do.
How long does it take to put together one episode? Or I'm not sure, how many are you releasing per season? Because I know I got 4 screeners to watch. But I don't know if there's more planned, or you kind of go as is, or when it comes to season, does it take a long time to put these together individually and even an entire season?
I think each film is different as it relates to how much shooting we do. Again, if it's a posthumous versus an icon who we're going to do a new interview with, all those type of production logistical variables can impact the schedule. This season we did 4 episodes, just the way sort of the programming grid worked out. That was kind of the right number for MGM and us this year. We've done 8 in each of the previous 2 seasons. And the timing really, it can differ. You know, we've done them. Usually I would say 3 to 6 months is the general rule of thumb from when we press go on something to when we deliver it. So you know, we try to take when we can. You know, as any sometimes you have to move quicker because of whatever the reason. But we love to take our time as much as we can to really get into the depths of these folks and you know, time is the craftsman, as they say, and use time to our advantage to put the best story together.
I don't know if this is a question or just like a comment or observation by me. I found it really impressive. Credit to your editorial team too, the editing team, because to put it on 50 minutes runtime, to capture so much of their lives, the past, the current, and you know, the in between. And, you know, a lot of times documentaries are a couple hours long or at least 90 minutes. You guys capture a lot of content and it's very digestible in the 50 minutes or 1 hour with commercials or whatnot. But how do you manage to do that? Because I felt like a whole story was told and I got enough. I didn't need to get any more. I felt the important details were there, the backstories, the family life. In 50 minutes, that's really impressive to do, Paul. I don't know what the process is, but every episode I watched so far, it was just so nicely buttoned up and it made sense I got enough as a viewer that I need it, you know, to digest too.
I guess, I mean, it really is a credit to the editors. I mean, you know, I think it's just a matter of knowing the material really well and just making those sometimes tough decisions about this is good, but it doesn't quite fit, or this is good, but the footage doesn't, it's an interesting story, but it doesn't really exist. I mean, it's sort of the challenge of documentary filmmaking. Even when you do get that new interview, you're working with a lot of found footage, or you're digging for found footage that you have never seen before. So it is a bit like kind of making a jigsaw puzzle, but you're kind of making the pieces one by one and doing the whole thing at the same time, right? It's a matter of finding the individual bits you need to tell the whole larger story. You know, and as to the runtime, I think that's I don't have a great answer for you on that. You know, I think there can be great stories that are 60 seconds long and ones that are 6 hours long, and there's something about that duration. I think with the quality of the archives is a nice sweet spot for really giving us the opportunity to show and let some things play out. You know, just again, to go back to that press conference, you'll see a longer version of that press conference in this film than maybe you'll see in other pieces where they're shorter and you just use one little soundbite. And those are the moments where we can kind of give something a larger context. But you know, after 50 to 60 minutes, hopefully we're able to capture that and give it enough that I think that word digestible you use is an important one. Right. I mean, there's a point where you put so much information in that it doesn't matter anymore because it just goes on forever. So I think that's the charge for us as filmmakers, is to kind of, again, find that sweet spot between really great, interesting, engaging material, but not so many helpings of it that you feel like it's too much and you lose interest.
Awesome job all around, like I said, by you and a crew. And it takes a whole team to produce something like that. And you guys have really gotten the right formula. And, you know, like I said, I'm captivated. I have one more episode to go the Bill Connor one. I'm very excited keeping that for tonight. But awesome stuff, very informative, enjoyable, entertaining. Everything is here. And you come out, I think, ultimately having a lot more even respect or knowledge about these people that we see, you know, on the field, but what they've done and the impact they made, not only on the sport, but on the world in a lot of ways too. So fantastic work, Paul. I'm excited. Hopefully you continue, and I got to go find a way to catch up on previous seasons too.
Well, I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting Icons. And again, thanks again for the kind words.
Absolutely. Anytime, Paul. Thanks so much for taking the time and talking.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.